what's location emergency?
Yes, we are on 85 South. Someone's laying on the side of the road. They've been shot.
Is he breathing, honey?
Yes, he's breathing, but he's yelling for help.
Okay.
He's in a lot of pain. So there's 2 people here, both of them shot.
2 shots?
Yeah, there's 2 people here, both have been shot. My dad's out there with them. My dad said that one guy's down the side of the road, so he's been shot. Looks like there's another person over in the ditch that's also been shot.
Are they both breathing?
Yeah, they're both breathing. They just look like they've been thrown out.
They look like they were thrown out?
Yeah.
It's Christmas Eve, and dispatch notifies the on-call detectives. We have a male and female that have been shot, and they're lying on the side of I-85.
At the time of our arrival, they both had apparent gunshot wounds to the back of their head. Looking at the wound, we think that the victims were shot with small caliber guns, and it appeared to be a body dump. The male victim was saying to the deputies that arrived that he was just giving the guy a ride. That's all he would say, and that's all we had to go off of. Mr. Dobson had severe brain damage from the gunshot wounds, and at the time, the prognosis was very touch and go. Miss Fowler was on life support for a little bit, and she died from her injuries.
I was mad, torn between, do I scream, cry? What do I do, It was devastating. Mary was my sister. She was almost like my mother. Your mother's love is something that you never get anywhere else. And that's the way I felt about my sister. That's how close we was. Mom and Dad, they did the best they could do. But my mom worked in a cotton mill all the time. My daddy, he was a retired veteran. So there was my sister, my big sister, taking care of me all the time. She would cut my hair, and I hated that. But, hey, it come out to be good because she was a cosmetologist there for a little while. And then as I got older, I took care of her, done the best I could for her. Then this tragedy happened. I met James Dobson through my sister. He was always a super nice guy. Somebody needs something, he's always there. Great person. Hate that happened to him.
And I'm sorry somebody walks here on the face of the earth. It can be so bad to somebody. And I don't understand a lot of things and why it's happened. But God's a good God. And he's in control. He's a good God, and he's in control.
The crime scene is just the side of the interstate highway. There's no houses there, some high grass, lots of traffic. It's semi-rural. So, it's nothing that's gonna have a traffic camera or anything like that.
Not a whole lot was there other than the victims and just assorted trash. You don't know if that's related to the people that were found or just regular trash that blew out of a car somewhere going down the road.
It was obvious to us that they didn't shoot each other because there are no weapons found on the scene. So immediately we felt like there was a third person involved in this.
Essentially, for the lack of better terms, we have a whodunit. Not far up from where this happened, there was a person that called in and said that she had saw a car pull up in her neighborhood, and the white guys start dumping stuff out of the trunk. Deputies get there and look at it and realize that there's just a bunch of stuff that belonged to Mr. Dobson. Clothes and just different stuff.
We got the description of the person that they saw dumping the stuff, and it was a white male, brown hair and glasses. That was a huge thing for us. That was a big break.
Through friends and relatives, we learned that Mary and James worked together. They were just friends. And from my understanding, they went out for the night. As far as where they were going, we still did not know. But we learned that Mr. Dobson had his parents' car, which was a Hyundai. And we learned that this car was missing. We put out a bolo to all the agencies in the close proximity.
We knew we had to have that car, and that car eventually would lead us to a suspect.
I was patrolling in through the rural area, and I noticed a young Caucasian male sitting in a vehicle on the side of the road. It was a Hyundai Elantra. This young male had dark hair and was wearing glasses, and I spoke to him and asked him what he was doing in the area, and he said he was just resting. I knew that the Flemings did live there, but the house that he was parked near, that was not the Fleming residence, but just down below it. So it just looked strange, the vehicle sitting on the side of the road. And I said, I need to see a license and registration. He handed me a license, and I looked down and I saw the name John Villarreal.
Whiskey 42.
I'm at Clement Road off Marcus Creek with one white male who says that the vehicle belongs to a friend. Yes, I'm not sure what's going on with it.
10-4.
When I ran the vehicle license plate through the dispatch, it came back to a different vehicle. That raised another red flag. So I ran the VIN. VIN came back. It was involved in a homicide. I unsnapped the safety on my weapon, and I approached very calmly, and I said, I'm going to need to handcuff you. I handcuffed him and pat him down. He did have a knife, but he didn't have any firearms on him.
When we got the call, I don't even remember my feet hit the floor before I was in the seat of the car, taking off. We need to go right now. Drop everything. Let's see where this takes us.
So when we first get there, I look in the car, and one of the first things I noticed was the blood that was in the driver's seat and the passenger seat of the car. Dried blood.
We find some shell casings. In the car, they find several firearms, 22s, which match what has struck our victims, and we found several silencers.
We found a Bible with Mr. Villarreal's name in it. From a name tag, we learned that his nickname was Jack. We also found a ledger with his name on it. In this ledger, he was writing down a plan to go rescue this girl that he met online from the situation she was in. Once we start looking at that stuff, he was coming from a person of interest to a suspect.
Thinking back to the initial call for the stuff dumped on the side of the road, the first thing I noticed, brown hair, glasses, white male. And I'm thinking, wow, this is the guy. Mr. Fleming stated that they were in a little online group together, like a Second Amendment type conservative group. And he said Mr. Villarreal was skilled at making silencers for firearms. And that's essentially why he was there to visit them that day, was to talk about stuff like that.
But like I was telling you, since you're sitting here in handcuffs, we're talking to you and all that kind of stuff, I have to read you the rights. Right. Okay.
The ultimate goal is to get a confession. You know, we need to get the facts and the story of what happened, what took place inside that car.
Well, what's going on? Why are we?
I'd like to know. I'd like to know, honestly.
She was just a happy-go-lucky. I'll never forget her smile and just her laugh. She was good-hearted. The Thanksgiving before that Christmas, she was fixing 2 turkeys because she was feeding everybody. She didn't mind doing anything for anybody. When a tragedy happens like that, it made me really not trust anybody because we didn't know who could have done that.
They call you Jack, is that right?
Yeah, that's my nickname.
Well, tell me about Jack.
Whenever I go to interview a suspect, I'm open-minded, you know, given their lifestyles, the choices they've made. But we learned that he was in the militia, so we want to ask about that because you try to build a rapport with them to where they feel more comfortable talking to you.
Well, you're wearing a Marine shirt.
I used to want to be a Marine. I didn't qualify, so. And I still wear the shirt because I have friends who are both Army and Marines.
Mm-hmm. Why didn't you qualify?
It just wasn't fit enough.
Well, what about this little conservative group you participate in on Facebook?
We're a Minuteman group, very peaceful. Basically, we keep up to date with what's going on as far as natural disasters, international relations, you know. Yeah. If we were ever invaded or anything like that, we're ready to be able to help out and defend. We try to be able to cooperate with the local sheriffs and stuff to secure things. Sometimes people get the wrong idea because there are, of course, extremist militias. We're not one of those. Okay. We're very moderate.
He wants us to know they're a friend of law enforcement. They'll help the local sheriff in times of disaster. So he wants to paint himself as a good guy. And I wasn't buying it.
Well, what about Jeffrey, the guy we'll see today?
What about him?
Why were you visiting Jeffrey today?
I just felt like it.
I mean, did you come from your house or did you come from somewhere else?
No, I came from a friend's house because I had borrowed a car from him and stuff.
Who was that?
A guy named John Christopher Lee. I'd like to know why he didn't tell me about that.
About what?
About the plate not matching the car. I mean, the sheriff told me the plate didn't match the car.
Who was this John Christopher Lee?
He's an acquaintance of mine. I've known him about a year, 2 years or so. I thought I could trust him. I thought he was a good guy. I don't know what all he's been involved with. I'm not sure I want to know.
When he was talking about his friend John, he's doing a good job of trying to deflect everything off of him, put it on somebody else. It was just more of him trying to string us along.
Why is there nothing that says John Christopher Lee in that car?
I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. I don't know what's even in the car.
Well, let me ask you this. How would your ID get in the car?
It shouldn't have been in the car.
A student Bible with your name in it, a ledger in the dash with your name on it.
Well, then it shouldn't have been there.
Well, tell me about the guns that's in that car.
Guns?
Guns. No.
No, I'm not giving you anything.
Okay, because your buddy...
Why was there a gun in the car?
You tell me.
Well,
Your
I don't
buddy
know.
told us about how you make silencers with your lathe and stuff like that.
I don't make silencers.
You don't.
No.
So the silencer fairy put guns in your car.
I don't know who did anything, okay? That's the problem.
And there's shell casings in the car from where somebody can shoot 22s. And guess what else is in the car? 3 22 guns, 2 pistols, a rifle, and some .380 bullets.
I don't know. I don't know where they came from, how they got there. I didn't put them there, that's all I know. Problem is that I feel like I'm being set up for something.
No.
Not by you.
Now, listen. Don't sit there and tell lies and stuff like that, okay?
No. I'm just confused. I'm very confused.
Me and you both.
He was going through that interview just plain oblivious, like he didn't have any idea, didn't know anything about anything. I just wasn't buying it. We know that he's lying to us.
Do you get the impression that we know more than you think we do?
No. I get the impression that you're trying to get me to say something that's not true.
When was the first time you borrowed the car?
First time I borrowed the car was on Christmas Eve. Yes, sir.
What time was it?
What time? I'd say it was pretty early in the morning, maybe around 6 o'clock or so.
So essentially, he tells us that he's in possession of the car at the time of the murder. Now's a good time to flip the table and put him on his heels, where he's thinking in his mind, like, oh, they got a lot more than I thought they have.
Who else was in the car with you?
Nobody.
Nobody.
I didn't have a reason for anybody to be else in the car, anybody else to be in the car with me.
I need to know about the man and the woman that was in that car with you at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Man and woman.
Man and a woman that was in that car with you on Christmas Eve.
I don't know about a man and a woman.
Well, you just said you picked up the car between 6 and 7 Christmas Eve morning.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will tell you what I know between 6 and 7 Christmas Eve morning.
Okay.
Okay, that car was going down 85 with 3 people in it. Somewhere around the 16-mile marker, 2 people got shot and drug out of the freaking car. And a couple miles up the road, somebody that looks like you dumped all their out of the trunk of that car.
What?
You didn't pull the car on a side street somewhere and dump a bunch of out of the trunk.
No. Someone did that?
Yeah.
Why?
White male, brown hair and glasses.
Why?
You tell us. You're a smart fellow.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And obvious.
Well, wait a minute. You can't tell me you ain't been riding in this car and didn't see the blood in the seat.
Blood? That's blood?
I saw it when I walked up there in Belton when I first got caught there. You're telling me you've been in the car for 5 hours and ain't seen no blood?
I saw a stain, I didn't know it was blood. I figured it was wine or something like that. I mean, I'm not stupid, but
Wine in the car?
people do drink and drive.
Yeah.
I don't, but people do.
The open container of corn whiskey's not yours either.
What corn whiskey?
The corn whiskey we fish to get your fingerprints off of. And those guns will get your fingerprints off of.
I don't know how my fingerprints would get on something.
It's easy. Well, there's no such thing as a fingerprint prairie, so let's just cut that out right now.
Hold on. I'm not saying there is, okay? Okay, I'm not saying there is. I don't believe in fairies. I don't believe in coincidences. I'm saying a person, a human being, okay?
Someone.
But yes, that's what I'm saying.
But how would they do all that?
I don't know, okay? I don't work for the CIA.
Why would the CIA want you?
No, that's not the point that I'm getting at, okay? The point is that it takes someone with that skill level.
Again, why would they come after you? What are you?
I wouldn't think the CIA would. I think that a criminal might try to throw something on me if I was convenient, but if John Richard really did something, I'm not saying he did or didn't because I don't know. But if he did, I was convenient. I don't know.
This? I mean, what makes you so popular that you got to be framed?
I don't know. I can't tell you because I don't know. Okay?
You can tell us because you know the truth. That it's eating away at you inside. That's why you went to John's house this morning. Let me finish. I'm talking.
Well, I am too.
You went to John's house this morning because what happened is eating you alive inside.
Nothing's eating me. I mean, I don't know what you expect. I've told you everything. I've told you the truth. It's all I can do. I mean, I want to know what's going on. I don't know what we're even talking about. It doesn't make sense, but the point is that it's the only explanation I have.
All right, let's get back to Christmas Eve. So when you borrowed the car on Christmas Eve, where did you go?
I drove down to Fitzgerald, Georgia. I needed a ride to go down to take care of the situation with my girlfriend. She said that her stepdad was beating her and stuff, and I wanted to go find out what was actually happening.
Why not call the police? You're a law-abiding citizen.
I wanted to find out if something was really going on or if someone was just making drama.
What happened down there?
Well, unfortunately, her mom got mad at me. Told me to leave. I did. I like the girl. That's irrelevant to this. I really want to stay focused on what we're talking about here. Because, I mean, we have a situation here. I'm in a pickle, and I want to know...
You are.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie, okay? I'm in a world of... Obviously, I was in a car that had a plate that doesn't match it. That in itself is a world of...
What else happened in the car?
Nothing else happened to the car. I don't know what else to tell you.
We're not really going anywhere, and he's sticking in the same little circle.
I don't know what to tell you other than what I told you.
So Sergeant Gavin comes in, and he's very good at what he does.
I'm sorry, I can't help you. I wish I could.
While Lieutenant Mitchell and I are in the interview room itself, Sergeant Gebbing is getting the information straight up from ATF and everybody who's at the house in Greenville County. We're getting all this new information. They found his lathe and maglite flashlights that he would use to make his silencers. So Gebbing's going to come in and he's going to lay that out for him and just give him the opportunity one more time to tell us exactly what happened.
I hate to interrupt there, boss. I'm Rob Gibbon. I'm the sergeant up here.
Understood.
Kind of helping them with this case.
Naturally. To be honest, I want this case dealt with because I don't...
Boss, you're in trouble. This is a murder case.
I understand that. They've explained that to me.
Can I talk?
Yes, sir.
I got limited time, limited patience.
Yes,
I don't mean to be rude, but I am kind of just to the point.
Yes, sir.
You can tell me those weren't your guns. That's fine.
Okay.
My guys and the ATF are at your house right now and just found the heads of the mag lights in your room. You're caught. If that crap ain't yours, I have a very easy fix to prove that it's not.
Okay.
Here's what I propose.
Okay.
Simple procedure. I take a couple Q-tips, just swab them inside your mouth, goes in a little envelope, gives me a DNA sample.
All right.
I send them in to compare to the silencers. And if it ain't yours, it won't be your DNA, will it?
I can give you a sample of my DNA, but I want legal counsel first.
Before I do this?
Yes, sir.
Are you wanting legal counsel to continue speaking?
No.
Okay, great. What's up with those plans that you drew up in that ledger about going down there and her sneaking out of the window and going to the safe house?
As I've told these gentlemen, I don't have a ledger.
Kid, can I be frank with you?
That's what I would hope you would do.
Great. In a couple hours, we're going to have your fingerprints because those handcuffs, those indicate that you're under arrest. So I'm going to fingerprint said ledger and prove to you that it is. Okay?
Prints can be planted. That's the problem.
Listen.
I understand what you're saying, okay? I do.
If that is the best you got, you're in trouble.
Unfortunately, that's the best I've got, which means that I've got a problem.
Prints can be planted. So there's somebody right now running around with an exact replica of your prints, putting your prints all over, right?
I don't know how they do it, but I know it's been done. Okay? I know people have done it before. All right?
Funny, I've not seen it yet.
You've never seen someone plant a print, or you've never heard of it anywhere.
No.
Have you never read anything by Robert Ludlum?
No.
Well, then that's a problem.
Who's Robert Ludlum? What is he?
Born Identity, Born Supremacy, Born Ultimatum.
I've seen the movies.
Movies are horrible, okay? The movies are ridiculous and stupid. The books have a lot of very realistic stuff that is done.
Well, so what you're saying is somewhere between Greenville, Belton, Anderson County, South Carolina, and Georgia, Fitzgerald, Georgia, there's somebody running around with Robert Ludlum-esque skills planting your prints on stuff for what purpose? Help me out.
I don't know. I'm sorry, but I don't know. Okay?
For him to say that it was planted or put there by somebody else, I just wasn't buying it.
Correct.
I've never heard of fingerprints being planted as far as in the real world. No, that didn't happen.
My world's simple and straightforward, okay? I have people I've pissed off in the past for saying crap to them. Cool. I'm not sure that you understand how I feel. It's the only explanation that I can come up with, so I don't know.
Here's why you're going to be charged with murder.
Why?
Well, probably because you did it.
I didn't do it.
But here's the issue that you got. And follow along with me, because I'm going to explain it to a damn jury, and then I'm going to see you get on the bus and go to prison.
I'm listening intently.
Okay? There's a car. 2 people are shot. That car belongs to one of them. And there's blood in the car. And the same day that you went and got it, sometime between 6 and 7, is when they end up on the side of the road, freaking shot in the head.
Well,
so if you don't have stop, kid.
I'm sorry.
If you don't have an explanation, that's fine. You don't have to. I will explain it for you.
I want to try to understand something a moment.
I want the truth out of you, and if you're not willing to give it to me, so be it. That's your choice. That's your right. But I'm going to pack my up, and I'm going to go about my life. I've got a lot of work ahead of me. Making sure that I've got the right guy. Tell me the honest to Christ truth what happened. I want to know how them people ended up getting shot. You're caught.
Well, I do too.
You are caught, kid.
I'm not caught.
Look at you!
I'm under arrest. I've been arrested, but I didn't do anything.
Come morning, you're going to get read a murder warrant.
I didn't do
You're going to
anything.
get read a murder warrant and a carjacking warrant and an attempted murder warrant. And if that freaking dude dies between now and about a year, you're going to get another murder warrant.
What dude? You said you found 2 people shot.
Mm-hmm.
What are you even talking about?
Shot in the very same car that we caught you in today. If you don't have an explanation for what happened, fine.
I gave you my explanation.
And I'm going to wear you out with it. Someday you're going to regret lying to me. It's going to be when you're on a bus to a prison.
Several times he would let out sighs, and several times he would stop. He was trying to be in control. And when Sergeant Gebbing came in, he knew at that point he was no longer in control.
I'm not interested in keeping on doing this because the thing is, I've told you what the truth is. Okay. I've told you what happened.
Well, I am about something. I've lost. I
think we covered everything.
More or less. All right, you can put him back downstairs and let me get my keys. Hold on. We'll get going. I got a lot of work to do. Hey, if you change your mind, and never want to get right with me, or change your mind about that DNA thing. I'm gonna get one eventually. It's just gonna take a little bit.
Well, once I've spoken with a public defender, I'll consider it. I'm not going to rule anything out because, frankly, anything that can work in my favor is a good thing.
Hey, if it wasn't you, it would have worked in your favor. But...
It's frustrating that, you didn't close the case or get the confession right then. But at the same time, he gave us over an hour of stuff that we can now pick apart and figure out what's true and what's not. Keep in mind, we had people searching the house, too.
I was headed out to my car when the desk officer ran out the back door and says, "Hey, he's banging on the door and he's hollering for a detective." So I turned around, went back inside, opened the door and just said, "Listen, if you want to run us down the same stuff we've been going over for the last 2 hours, we're not here for that, okay? But if you want to go upstairs and you want to really talk about what really happened, then we're all ears."
All right, are we on audio record?
Yes, sir.
Good. I want a copy of it sent to my family, too. I'm not here for a question and answer session. I'm here to tell you what happened.
What happened?
We might as well start over. What I'm going to tell you is going to make your jaw drop, probably. And before I start, I want to tell you, there's no human being or group of human beings on the face of this planet that could ever instill fear in me. I've had a loaded gun put to my head. I've had my own gun put to my head by someone before, and it didn't put fear in me. But there is one person who I am afraid of, and that's God. I can't stand before him in judgment day to deny something I did. And I don't give a damn about a lawyer, because no lawyer can make it right for God. Go back to the night before Christmas Eve. I get a message from my girl telling me that her stepdad has been beating her, etc. So immediately I jumped and I said, if I could steal a car and come down there right now and get you out of there and get you somewhere safe, I said, would you do it? And she said yes. So I packed my gear.
What kind of gear would you pack?
Dry clothes. Guns.
Which one of your guns did you use?
Walter P.22.
With the suppressor on it then?
With the suppressor on it. So I went, and the plan was to rescue us. But I expected that when I got down to her place, I expected someone to pull a gun on me. Okay, and I expected at that point to go ahead and just whack everybody in there and try not to think about it. Mother, stepfather, and older brother. The three adults. The three people who would actually be a threat to me if I tried to do an extraction. Okay? In terms of pulling somebody out, it's called a wet extraction because it's bloody. Alright?
Tell us what happened Christmas Eve morning.
I didn't want to hurt anybody originally. I'm not that kind of guy.
I can see that.
And the first thing I did, I tried to find a car to hotwire. Because to be honest with you, I didn't want to have to hurt anyone, and frankly, I would have rather bring it back when I was done. And unfortunately, my mechanical genius isn't quite to that level. So the next thing I figured was, well, I could hitchhike and then try to commandeer the car, hold him at gunpoint, tell him get out. Well, they were rolling along down Fletcher Street, in fact, when I came across him. Had my pack on my back, my rain suit still on, cap on my head. And I asked him if they could take me to I-85. He said, do you have some gas money? I said, how much do you want? $5. I said, okay, $5.
Who was in the car?
The man and the woman. Don't know their names, don't really care, but I hope he survives, to be honest with you. And I got in that car, and we started going, and they were as nice as anything. And then the man offered to take me to the Georgia line. He said he had the time to do it. Said he'd do it for $25 in gas money. Reasonable enough.
So when he said this, were you already in the car?
I was in the car. We were going down I-85 at that point. As we were driving down the road, I got to a point where I was ready to try to commandeer the car. And you know what? I told him I had to take a leak. Asked him to pull over. Classic move. They never suspected it. You know what? In the moment, I presumed the man was armed. As a result, I didn't try to commandeer the car. But I assumed. Okay? I didn't even give him a chance to show a gun. Driver's sitting here directly in front of me, headrest is in between. I'm sitting in the left passenger seat. Passenger's here. The first thing you do is you take in. The first thing you do is tell yourself, don't think about it, don't feel. Because you can't do it if you think, because you know it's wrong. And you take aim, perfect aim, boom, one in the head with her. She slumps over. Before the man can react, I screwed over quick, boom. I missed, I hit his neck. Then I put 3 rounds right in his neck because I was trying to hit the head, but I was trying to shoot too quick because I wanted to get it done. Didn't really want to shoot him, didn't really want to do it, and I did it. Fired 4 rounds out of the 22. 1 to the woman's head, 3 in the man's neck.
Well, what made you take her out first?
She was more convenient physically.
How'd you get him out of the car?
I rolled them out, just pulled them. All of their clothes and everything that was in the car, because they had a bunch of stuff in the car.
Yeah.
Dumped on the side of the road, on that little back road. I went and changed the plate.
Where'd you get the tag from?
I don't even remember what car, what address it was. I found a car in a driveway where
Was it near where you dumped the stuff?
Fairly close, yeah. Yeah. I want the owner of that car to know I'm sorry for that too. And I want that man's family and the woman's family to know I'm sorry for what I did and that I can never fix that or repay it.
It's chilling to hear him talk about the victims. I'm not buying any of his reactions. They're all fabricated. I mean, you know, he's not a great actor. He should have read some acting books other than the Jason Bourne books.
What made you shoot him rather than just take the car out and go for it?
Because I thought he might have a weapon and I assumed, like I said.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. When you get what's called a fight or flight reflex, the blood flow to your frontal lobe of your brain cuts off. That's the problem. You start losing your grip between defense and offense. You start forgetting the difference between reality and fantasy. You start forgetting the difference between what the CIA actually does versus what a civilian can do. You know, the thing is, the only thing I need a gun for is to either hunt or defend myself. Shouldn't be walking around thinking about, you know, well, how would I take this person out? I'm not against guns. I think everyone should have guns. I wish the man had a gun. I wish he'd pulled it on me and dealt with me. Because then he'd be alive and I wouldn't be. For 2 days after that, I prayed for that man to survive. Because once I realized that I had hit him in the neck, I realized he might survive. I kept praying. And I kept praying for forgiveness. And the thing is, the Lord can't give forgiveness if you don't tell the truth. If you lie about it, you're going to hell.
The only time he was really emotional was when he was talking about God and getting into heaven. Nothing else mattered to him. I think he started telling us what really took place because he just needed that little bit of alone time to talk with the man upstairs, and, it was time.
Okay. Well, we'll take you back downstairs. You got any questions or anything from us?
Yeah, I'm just gonna need some food and drinks.
Oh, yeah.
In your career, you'll meet a few that you'll always remember because you do feel that they're just pure evil. And by his own admission, that he told us there were more people going to die. We definitely knew we had the right guy, and he needed to be where he was. And several folks in the state of Georgia are still alive today because of that. And that's a good feeling.
I'd like to understand why did you do what you done? Why?
He robbed Mary of her life. He robbed James Dobson of his ability to continue his life without being stuck in a wheelchair. He did his crime, and he received the appropriate sentence to spend the rest of his life in prison.
Every morning I get up, I look in there in the living room, and there's a curio cabinet with her picture in it. And it strikes me every time. She'll never be forgotten. Not in my book. Not my sister.
If she were here and you could, say something to her, say one more thing to her, what do you think that would be?
I love you.
The call came in just after 2 in the morning, slicing through the quiet like a blade. In the Texas summer of 1982, that hour belonged to cicadas, distant engines, and the heavy stillness that settled over small towns after midnight. The dispatcher's voice was clipped, urgent, stripped of emotion by repetition and training. A body had been found along a service road, just outside town limits. No name, no witnesses, only a shape on the ground that refused to move. By the time the first patrol car arrived, the heat was already rising from the asphalt, turning the air thick and metallic. Headlights washed over gravel, weeds, and a pair of legs stretched unnaturally still. The officer stepped out slowly, hand resting on his belt, instinctively scanning the darkness beyond the beams. There was no movement, no sound except the ticking of the engine and his own breathing. One look was enough to know this wasn't an accident. This was the kind of discovery that rewrote nights, that followed people home and kept them awake long after sunrise. Texas in 1982 was wide and loud by day, but at night it could feel empty, almost abandoned. Highways cut through fields and oil land, carrying strangers who never learned the names of the towns they passed. The service road where the body lay was one of those forgotten strips of pavement, used by truckers to pull over and locals to avoid traffic. It wasn't a place anyone lingered. That made it perfect. And that realization settled in quickly among the officers on scene. She was young. That much was obvious. Her eyes were open, fixed on nothing, reflecting the harsh white of flashlights. One shoe was missing. The other lay twisted at an angle that suggested she hadn't left it behind willingly. There was dust on her clothes, ground into fabric as if she'd been dragged or had fought against the earth itself. No pers. No identification. Just a body cooling under the Texas sky, already becoming a mystery. As backup arrived, red and blue lights pulsed against the darkness, a silent alarm to anyone awake nearby. The road was shut down. Yellow tape went up, fluttering weakly in the hot wind. A small crowd gathered at a distance, drawn by curiosity and fear in equal measure. People whispered. Some recognized her face before the police said a word. Others prayed it wasn't someone they knew. In towns like this, those were often the same thing. Detectives reached the scene before dawn, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp despite the hour. They moved with practiced urgency, photographing, measuring, marking every detail before the sun could burn it away. A cigarette butt lay crushed near the edge of the gravel. Tire impressions cut through the dirt, overlapping, confused, half destroyed by passing vehicles. There were marks on her arms, bruises already darkening, telling a story without words. The medical examiner would later confirm what everyone suspected. This was a homicide. When the sun finally crept over the horizon, it revealed more than just the body. It revealed a town waking up to a nightmare. Radios crackled with early reports. Phones rang in kitchens and living rooms. By mid-morning, everyone knew. A woman had been killed, dumped by the road, and no one knew why. Her name was released later that day, and with it came the second shock. She wasn't a drifter. She wasn't passing through. She lived here. She had family just a few miles away. She had plans, routines, people who expected her home the night before. The idea that someone could vanish, be murdered, and left so close to familiar streets sent a wave of panic through the community. This wasn't something that happened in big cities on the evening news. This was here. The investigation moved fast at first, driven by pressure and outrage. Detectives knocked on doors until knuckles were raw. They retraced her last known movements, minute by minute, asking the same questions again and again. Who saw her last? Where was she going? Did she mention meeting someone? A gas station clerk remembered her stopping by late, buying a soda, asking about a shortcut. A neighbor heard a car idle too long near midnight. A trucker recalled seeing a woman standing by the road, waving him past. Each detail felt important. Each one slipped through their fingers when they tried to hold it still. Suspects emerged almost immediately, as they always do. An ex-boyfriend with a temper and a shaky alibi. A local man known for hanging around the highway late at night. A trucker passing through with a record in another state. They were questioned, scrutinized, compared against what little evidence existed. None of it stuck. Alibis hardened. Timelines refused to line up. The case grew heavier with every unanswered question. Forensics in 1982 offered limited comfort. Blood typing narrowed possibilities but named no one. Fibers were compared under microscopes, similarities noted, conclusions hedged. The cigarette butt was logged, bagged, and filed away, its potential unrealized in an era before DNA databases. Every test ended the same way, with language that sounded official but meant nothing. Inconclusive. The funeral was held under a blazing sun, the kind that made grief feel heavier, harder to carry. The church overflowed. People stood outside, fanning themselves, listening through open doors as hymns drifted out into the heat. The casket passed slowly, and with it went a piece of the town's sense of safety. Parents hugged children tighter. Doors were locked earlier at night. Every unfamiliar car became a source of suspicion. As weeks turned into months, the investigation slowed. Detectives followed leads that led nowhere. Tips came in, some sincere, some wild, some clearly driven by fear rather than fact. Each one was logged, checked, crossed off. The file grew thick, then stagnant. New cases demanded attention. Resources shifted. The murder remained officially open, but everyone involved could feel the momentum fading. By the first anniversary, the phrase cold case began to surface in quiet conversations. Not in press releases, not in official statements, but in the way people spoke when they thought no one was listening. The patrol cars no longer lingered near the service road. The spot where she was found blended back into the landscape, just another stretch of Texas pavement. Cars passed without slowing, drivers unaware or unwilling to remember what had happened there. Years moved on. Children grew up hearing fragments of the story, warnings disguised as bedtime tales. Don't stay out late. Don't trust strangers. Remember what happened in '82. The victim's family marked time by absence, by birthdays and holidays that felt permanently altered. They called the sheriff's office again and again, hoping for news that never came. The answers were always the same. No new leads. The investigation remains open. Decades later, The world changed in ways no one in that small Texas town could have imagined in 1982. Technology advanced. Old evidence found new purpose. Somewhere in an evidence room, items collected in the heat of that summer waited quietly, sealed and forgotten, holding information no one knew how to read back then. And then, almost 40 years after a body was found by the side of the road, a name surfaced again. Not whispered, not rumored, official. A suspect, charged. The headline spread fast, igniting shock and disbelief. For some, it felt like justice waking up after a long sleep. For others, it reopened wounds they had spent a lifetime trying to close. Because a cold case doesn't die. It lingers. It settles into the walls of a community, into memory and silence. And when it finally stirs, it brings every unanswered moment with it, demanding to be seen, to be heard, to be faced at last. The silence that followed the funeral did not mean peace, it meant absorption. The kind where a town swallows a tragedy whole and lets it sink into everyday life. Where people learn to step around an invisible wound without ever acknowledging it's still bleeding. In the weeks after her burial, the service road went back to being just a road, but no one who lived nearby ever drove past it the same way again. Some slowed without realizing. Some looked away. Some checked their rearview mirrors twice, then a third time because fear has a way of lingering long after the sirens stop. Inside the sheriff's office, the case refused to rest. Files were stacked, photographs pinned, timelines drawn and redrawn on yellow legal pads already stained with coffee rings and sweat. Detectives replayed the same night over and over, trying to force it into sense. Somewhere between the gas station stop and the stretch of dark pavement where her body was found, something had gone terribly wrong. The question was where. The question was who. And the question that haunted them most was how no one had seen it happen. They went back to the gas station first, the last confirmed place she'd been alive. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as detectives stood where she had stood, imagining her voice, her posture, her state of mind. The clerk remembered her clearly now, not because she seemed afraid, but because she didn't. She was calm, normal. She joked about the heat. She asked about the quickest way home. That detail stuck like a thorn. Whatever happened next, it didn't begin with panic. It began with trust, or at least with the absence of fear. From there, the timeline blurred. She should have been home within minutes. Instead, she vanished into a gap no one could explain. Detectives mapped every possible route, every turnoff, every place a car could pull over unnoticed. They drove those roads at night, headlights cutting through the same darkness, engines idling in the same quiet. They listened. They watched. Nothing revealed itself. The land gave nothing back. Witnesses were re-interviewed, their statements picked apart for cracks. The neighbor who heard an engine idling too long couldn't say what kind of car it was. The trucker who waved her past wasn't sure of the time. The farmer who heard something strange admitted it might have been coyotes. Memory shifted under pressure, reshaping itself to fit fear and hindsight. The harder detectives pushed, the less solid the recollections became. Rumors filled the gaps left by facts. Names circulated in whispers, passed from porch to porch, from barstool to barstool. A local man with a bad reputation. A drifter seen near the highway weeks earlier. A couple known for fighting loudly late at night. None of it could be proven. All of it added weight to a case already bending under expectation. In small towns, suspicion spreads faster than truth, and once a name is spoken aloud, it never fully escapes. The ex-boyfriend was questioned again, this time more aggressively. His alibi held, but only just. Friends vouched for him, timelines matched closely enough to raise doubts but not enough to file charges. He left the station shaken, angry, followed by looks that lingered too long. He would move away within a year, carrying the stain with him, guilty or not. The case claimed collateral damage without ever claiming a culprit. As summer gave way to fall, pressure mounted from outside agencies offering limited assistance and quiet judgment. Why hadn't there been an arrest? Why hadn't there been progress? The sheriff's department pushed back, citing lack of evidence, lack of resources, lack of cooperation. Behind closed doors, frustration simmered. They had a victim. They had a crime scene. They had a town demanding answers. What they didn't have was the one thing that mattered most. Evidence was re-examined again and again. The cigarette butt was tested, logged, tested again, its usefulness exhausted by the science of the time. Fibers from her clothing were compared against samples taken from suspects' vehicles, homes, workplaces. Similarities emerged, then collapsed under scrutiny. Nothing was definitive. Everything was almost. The medical examiner's report offered no clarity beyond confirmation of violence. Cause of death established, manner ruled homicide. Time of death estimated within a frustratingly wide window. Enough to know she had suffered. Not enough to know when help might have made a difference. That uncertainty gnawed at investigators, at the family, at anyone who allowed themselves to think too deeply about her final hours. Media attention flared briefly, then faded. A few headlines. A grainy photo in the local paper. A promise of justice that grew quieter with each passing week. Bigger stories took over. Elections. Accidents. Sports. The murder slipped from the front page to the archives, from conversation to memory. Officially, the case remained open. Unofficially, it began to freeze. By the time winter arrived, detectives were chasing shadows. Tips slowed to a trickle, then dried up altogether. The service road yielded nothing new. The town settled into an uneasy normalcy, learning to live with the absence of answers. The phrase, "if they didn't catch him by now," began to surface, usually followed by silence. Years stacked quietly on top of one another. Evidence boxes were sealed, labeled, and moved from one storage room to another as buildings changed and budgets shifted. New deputies joined the force, learning about the case as a cautionary tale. A reminder that not every crime ends with handcuffs and closure. The older investigators carried it differently. A weight they didn't speak about but never fully set down. The victim's family aged with the case. Grief hardened into something steadier, heavier. They marked anniversaries not with hope, but with endurance. Each phone call from an unknown number sparked a flicker that died quickly. Each news report about advances in forensic science stirred questions they were afraid to ask out loud. What if the answer had been there all along? What if time itself was the only thing missing? Decades later, when the evidence was finally pulled from storage again, it felt almost ceremonial. Gloves snapped on. Boxes were opened. Items touched for the first time in years saw light again. Technology had changed. The rules were different now. What once seemed useless was now full of potential. A sample preserved more out of protocol than expectation was re-examined, processed, translated into data that could be compared, matched, identified. The result didn't come with drama at first. Just a notification. A hit. A name that didn't belong to any suspect from 1982. A man who had lived quietly, who had aged, who had built a life that seemed incompatible with the word murder. Investigators stared at the file, feeling the strange dissonance of time folding in on itself. The realization spread slowly, deliberately. This wasn't closure yet. This was a door opening after 40 years of being sealed shut. And as the town prepared to hear the name, to see the past dragged back into the present, one truth became unavoidable. Time does not erase violence. It only waits. When the name finally surfaced inside the sheriff's office, it did not arrive with sirens or celebration. It came quietly, printed on a sheet of paper, carried by a lab report that spoke in clinical language and probabilities. The room went still as detectives read it, each of them aware that this was the moment they had waited for and feared in equal measure. A match. Not perfect, not absolute in the way television promised, but strong enough to reopen a door that had been sealed for decades. The man identified by the result was not a ghost from the past. He was alive. He had an address, a job history, a face that could be found in public records, aging year by year, ordinary in a way that felt almost obscene. He had lived through the same decades the town had, watching the world change, building a routine that had never once intersected with a courtroom for this crime. The idea that he might have carried the truth of that night with him for 40 years sent a chill through everyone who touched the file. Detectives moved carefully, knowing how fragile old cases could be. One misstep, one overreach, and the entire thing could collapse under scrutiny. They went back to the beginning, not with fresh eyes, but with eyes sharpened by time. They reread every statement, every note scribbled in haste during the summer of 1982. They compared timelines, locations, movements. Slowly, patterns emerged where there had once been noise. The suspect's name appeared in the margins more than once, overlooked, dismissed, lost among dozens of others. He had been questioned briefly years ago, a routine interaction that never escalated. He lived near the highway then. He worked hours that put him on the road late at night. None of it had seemed remarkable at the time. In hindsight, it felt suffocatingly obvious, a constellation of details that only aligned after decades of darkness. Surveillance began quietly. There were no dramatic stakeouts, no flashing lights. Just cars parked at a distance, eyes watching a man go about his life. He bought groceries. He chatted with neighbors. He laughed. There was nothing about him that fit the image people carried of a killer, and that made it worse. It suggested a level of control, of compartmentalization, that was difficult to accept. Investigators sought corroboration, anything to strengthen what the lab had suggested. They tracked down old witnesses, now elderly, their memories fragile but persistent. Some couldn't remember details. Others remembered too much, stories shaped by years of retelling. A few recalled the suspect vaguely, a man seen near the service road, a face that sparked discomfort without clarity. It wasn't enough on its own. It never was. The victim's family was notified with caution, brought into a room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. They listened as detectives explained the development, careful to manage expectations. A suspect identified. An investigation reopened. No promises. Just movement finally after a lifetime of stillness. The family absorbed the words differently, each of them carrying their own version of hope and dread. Hope that the truth might finally surface. Dread of what that truth might look like. As the news leaked, the town reacted with a mixture of disbelief and hunger. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when the suspect's name was mentioned. People searched their memories, trying to place him, trying to reconcile the man they knew with the act he was accused of. Some defended him immediately. Others recoiled. Old divisions resurfaced, lines drawn along memory and rumor. The past refused to stay buried. Detectives requested additional testing, squeezing every possible answer from the evidence. The technology that had once failed them now delivered details with unnerving precision. Partial profiles became stronger. Probabilities narrowed. The case began to solidify, not into certainty, but into something sturdy enough to stand in court. Each confirmation felt like another weight added to a scale that had been unbalanced for decades. The suspect was brought in for questioning under the pretense of routine follow-up. He walked into the interview room without resistance, unaware of how much the world around him had shifted. The room was small, windowless, designed to strip away comfort and control. He sat down, hands folded, eyes alert. When detectives mentioned the night in 1982, something flickered across his face. It was subtle, a tightening, paused too long to ignore. The questions came slowly at first, circling, probing. Where were you that night? Do you remember her? Had you ever been on that service road after midnight? His answers were measured, careful, rehearsed in the way only long-held memories can be. He denied knowing her, denied being there, denied everything that mattered. But denial alone was no longer enough. When detectives introduced the forensic findings, the atmosphere shifted. The suspect leaned back, exhaled, smiled faintly. He questioned the science. He questioned the timeline. He questioned the competence of a system that had waited 40 years to accuse him of anything. His confidence was unsettling, built on the knowledge that time erodes more than memories. It erodes cases. Charges were filed weeks later, after consultations, reviews, and a silence that stretched thin. The announcement was brief, factual, devoid of drama. A suspect charged in a 1982 homicide. The words echoed louder than any siren ever could. Reporters descended on the town, cameras trained on streets that had not seen this level of attention in generations. Headlines screamed what people had whispered for years. Cold case reopened. Arrest made. Justice delayed. The arrest itself was almost mundane. The suspect was taken into custody without resistance, hands placed behind his back, face unreadable. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, stunned. Some cried. Some shook their heads. The image of him being led away burned itself into the town's collective memory, a mirror held up to the past and the present at once. But the case was far from over. Defense attorneys moved quickly, dismantling the narrative piece by piece. They questioned the reliability of decades-old evidence. They attacked the gaps in the timeline. They argued contamination, coincidence, reasonable doubt. Each argument reopened wounds, forcing the community to confront the uncomfortable truth that reopening a case did not guarantee resolution. For the victim's family, the legal process became a new kind of torment. They sat through hearings, listening to their loved one reduced to exhibits and arguments. They heard the night dissected in ways that felt invasive, clinical, detached from the pain it had caused. Closure, they learned, was not a moment. It was a marathon, and they were already exhausted. As the trial loomed, the town held its breath. 40 years of silence had given way to noise, to speculation, to fear of disappointment. People wondered what it would mean if the case fell apart again, if the truth slipped through their fingers a second time. They wondered if some mysteries were too old to solve, too entrenched in time to ever fully emerge. And beneath it all, one question persisted, louder than the rest. If this man had lived among them for decades, if the truth had been this close all along, what else remained hidden, waiting patiently, confident that time would protect it? The days after the arrest did not bring relief. They brought a different kind of tension, the kind that sits low in the chest and tightens whenever a siren passes or a headline scrolls across a screen. The town was no longer just remembering the past, it was living inside it again. Every conversation seemed to circle back to the same questions, spoken softly or argued loudly, depending on who was listening. Was it really him? Why now? How could something so old still feel this raw? Inside the courthouse, the case took on a new shape. What had once been a collection of yellowed reports and fading photographs was now a living thing, examined under harsh lights, dissected by opposing narratives. Prosecutors spoke of patience, of science catching up with silence, of evidence that had waited decades for its moment. Defense attorneys spoke of time as a weapon, of memories corrupted, of proof stretched thin by years of neglect. Each side claimed reason. Each side claimed truth. The evidence that once felt like a breakthrough now faced relentless scrutiny. The forensic results were explained again and again, translated into language meant to persuade 12 strangers who had not lived through 1982. Probabilities were emphasized. Margins of error debated. Experts testified with calm authority, aware that every word could tip the balance. The defense countered with their own specialists, voices equally confident, casting doubt with surgical precision. Science, it seemed, could accuse and absolve in the same breath. Old witnesses were called, some walking slowly to the stand, leaning on canes, guided by family members. Their voices trembled not just with age, but with the weight of being asked to remember something they had tried to forget. Dates blurred. Details shifted. The prosecution urged the jury to see consistency beneath the uncertainty. The defense highlighted every hesitation, every contradiction, turning the passage of time into an ally. Photographs from the crime scene were displayed, grainy and stark, pulling the room back to that Texas road in 1982. Some jurors looked away. Others stared, absorbing the reality that had once been contained by police tape and rumor. The victim's family sat silently, hands clasped, eyes fixed forward. For them, this was not history. It was ongoing. Outside the courtroom, the town fractured in quiet ways. Some residents rallied behind the prosecution, convinced that justice, though late, was finally within reach. Others grew defensive, clinging to the image of the suspect as they had known him, a neighbor, a co-worker, a man who waved and smiled and seemed incapable of such violence. Yard conversations ended abruptly. Long-standing friendships cooled. The case drew lines no one had expected. The media fed the tension, replaying the story in looping segments, compressing 40 years into sound bites and graphics. Old footage surfaced. Black and white photographs of the victim as a young woman appeared alongside recent images of the accused, gray-haired and stiff. The contrast unsettled viewers, forcing them to confront how much time had passed, how much had been lost. As testimony continued, the narrative grew more complex. The prosecution reconstructed the night in fragments, placing the suspect near the service road, tying his movements to gaps in the timeline, suggesting opportunity and intent. The defense dismantled the reconstruction piece by piece, pointing out alternative explanations, missing links, unanswered questions. The jury was asked to navigate a maze built from memory, science, and doubt. Behind the scenes, the pressure on investigators was immense. A second failure would not just mean a lost case. It would mean reopening wounds without healing them, confirming fears that the truth had slipped away forever. Detectives reviewed their work obsessively, replaying interviews, rechecking reports, aware that any overlooked detail could unravel everything. The suspect remained outwardly composed throughout the proceedings. He listened, took notes, whispered occasionally to his attorneys. Observers searched his face for signs of guilt or remorse, but found only restraint. It was impossible to tell whether that restraint came from innocence, experience, or something darker. The ambiguity unsettled everyone. For the victim's family, each day in court was an endurance test. They heard their loved ones' final moments theorized, debated, reduced to arguments about probability. They watched as her life was summarized in minutes, her death examined in hours. Closure, once imagined as a single moment of justice, now felt distant and conditional. As the trial moved toward its climax, the weight of expectation pressed harder. The jury would soon retreat to deliberate, carrying with them decades of silence and weeks of testimony. The town waited, suspended between hope and dread, aware that whatever the verdict, it would not restore what had been taken. Because the truth about cold cases is this: solving them does not erase the years spent unsolved. It does not give back youth or peace or the sense of safety lost on a summer night long ago. It only offers an answer, fragile and contested, to a question that has haunted everyone involved. And as the courtroom lights dimmed for the evening and the jurors filed out, one thought lingered, heavy and unresolved. Even if the law reached a conclusion, the past would not release its grip so easily. It never does. The jury room closed with a dull thud, sealing 12 strangers inside a space thick with expectation and fatigue. Outside, the courthouse exhaled, its hallways suddenly quieter, as if the building itself understood that whatever happened next would echo far beyond its walls. Phones buzzed. Cameras waited. The town held its breath, caught between the need for an ending and the fear of another unanswered question. Inside that room, the past was laid out on a long table in the form of binders, notes, and memories borrowed from other people's lives. The jurors spoke cautiously at first, voices low, testing the air. They returned to the beginning, as everyone always does, to that summer night in 1982, to the service road, to the woman who never made it home. They talked about timelines, about gaps, about what felt solid and what felt slippery. Each juror carried a private scale, weighing belief against doubt. The forensic evidence became the center of gravity. Some saw it as the bridge across 4 decades, the one thing that did not age, that did not forget. Others saw it as fragile, vulnerable to contamination, interpretation, coincidence. They debated probabilities late into the afternoon, grappling with numbers that promised clarity but delivered ambiguity. Science, they learned, was not a verdict. It was a voice in the room, persuasive but not decisive on its own. Memories of witness testimony resurfaced, uneven and emotional. An elderly man's shaking hand as he pointed to a photograph. A woman's voice cracking as she tried to recall the sound of an engine in the dark. The jurors argued about reliability, about whether truth could survive 40 years intact. Some believed the essence remained even if details faded. Others worried that memory, like evidence, could be reshaped by time and repetition. As daylight slipped away, the conversation grew heavier. They spoke about the defendant not as an abstraction, but as a man who had lived, worked, aged. A man who sat quietly in the courtroom, whose life would be irrevocably altered by whatever decision they reached. The weight of that responsibility pressed down, complicating the narrative. Justice demanded certainty. The case offered none. Outside, the town filled the waiting hours with speculation. Cafes buzzed with whispered theories. Radios replayed analysis from legal experts who had never set foot on the service road. Families gathered around televisions, reliving a story that had woven itself into their lives long before the trial. The victim's family waited in silence, the familiar ache returning with new intensity. They had learned not to hope too loudly. Night fell and still the jury deliberated. They sent notes to the judge, requesting transcripts, clarifications, definitions. Each request signaled struggle, not progress. The courthouse lights burned late, a beacon of unresolved tension in a town that had already given too much patience to this case. When the jury finally emerged the next day, faces drawn and unreadable, the room snapped to attention. The verdict was delivered calmly, without flourish, words spoken that carried decades of anticipation. Guilty on some counts, not guilty on others. A split decision that satisfied no one completely and angered many. The law had spoken, but it had not silenced the questions. Reactions rippled outward immediately. Some embraced, tears spilling as if a dam had finally cracked. Others stared in disbelief, convinced that the truth had been diluted by compromise. The defendant remained composed, absorbing the outcome with a stillness that defied easy interpretation. His family reacted in fragments of shock and relief, anger and sorrow, emotions colliding without resolution. Sentencing was scheduled for a later date, prolonging the ordeal. The case, it seemed, refused to conclude cleanly. In interviews, prosecutors framed the verdict as a victory for perseverance, proof that time did not have the final say. Defense attorneys called it a warning, a demonstration of how uncertainty could be mistaken for guilt. Both narratives found an audience. In the days that followed, the town struggled to recalibrate. The trial had reopened old divisions and created new ones. Conversation stalled when the case came up, as if people feared saying the wrong thing. Some avoided the service road entirely. Others drove it deliberately, staring out the window, trying to imagine what had happened there, trying to feel something definitive. For the victim's family, the verdict was both an ending and a beginning. It confirmed aspects of what they had believed for years, while leaving other parts painfully unresolved. They spoke publicly of gratitude and exhaustion, of relief tempered by grief. Justice, they learned, was not the same as peace. The defendant awaited sentencing in a quiet cell, his future now shaped by a crime from another lifetime. Whether guilty or not in the eyes of every observer, he had become inseparable from the case, his name forever linked to that summer night. Time had not protected him. It had only delayed the reckoning. As weeks passed, attention drifted, as it always does. New stories replaced old headlines. But beneath the surface, the case continued to reverberate. Law enforcement agencies revisited their cold files, emboldened and unsettled by the outcome. Families of other victims wondered if their own cases might one day resurface, carrying hope and risk in equal measure. The service road remained unchanged. Asphalt stretched under the same Texas sky, indifferent to verdicts and arguments. Cars passed. Weeds grew. The place where a life ended held its silence, offering no confirmation, no denial. It was a reminder that locations remember differently than people do, that they absorb violence and carry on. In the end, the case left behind something more complex than closure. It left a community forced to confront the limits of certainty, the cost of waiting, the uneasy truth that some answers arrive incomplete. The past had been dragged into the present, examined, judged, and yet it refused to settle. Because a cold case, even when reopened, even when tried, does not truly thaw. It changes form. It lingers in verdicts that divide, in memories that resist alignment, in roads that look ordinary but are anything but. And long after the courthouse empties and the cameras leave, the question remains, quiet and persistent, echoing through the years. Was this the truth, or just the closest the truth could come after 40 years of silence? Sentencing arrived without ceremony, folded into the calendar like an obligation everyone had been trying to postpone. The courtroom filled again, not with anticipation this time, but with a weary gravity. Faces that had grown familiar over weeks of testimony took their places as if returning to a long, unfinished conversation. The judge listened, impassive, as arguments were restated, as if repetition might somehow change their weight. The prosecution spoke of accountability, of a life cut short and a truth delayed but not denied. They framed the sentence as the final step in a journey that had begun on a dark road in 1982. The defense countered with appeals to uncertainty, to mercy shaped by time, to the idea that punishment so late could never align with justice. Each side spoke carefully, knowing the words would be replayed, quoted, argued over long after the gavel fell. When the sentence was pronounced, it landed softly, almost anticlimactically, a legal conclusion to a story that refused to feel concluded. There was no outburst, no dramatic collapse. The defendant absorbed it with the same controlled stillness he had shown throughout the trial. His family reacted in fragments, some relief, some despair, emotions splintered by years of denial and sudden confrontation. The victim's family listened in silence, their expressions unreadable, carrying a verdict that answered some questions while amplifying others. Outside, microphones waited. Statements were delivered with practiced restraint. Justice served. System worked. Words that sounded solid until they were examined too closely. The town listened, nodded, argued, moved on all at once. But beneath the surface, the case continued to ripple, disturbing layers that had settled over decades. In the weeks that followed, attention shifted from the courtroom to the broader implications. Law enforcement agencies across the state revisited their own unsolved files, inspired and unsettled by what had happened here. Evidence rooms were reopened. Boxes were unsealed. The idea that time itself could be challenged gained traction, but so did fear. Fear of reopening wounds. Fear of raising expectations that might collapse under scrutiny. For the detectives who had worked the reopened case, there was no sense of victory, only exhaustion and a lingering unease. They replayed every decision, every assumption, aware that this case would be studied, criticized, cited. Some nights they found themselves thinking less about the conviction and more about the years before it, the missed connections, the moments when the answer might have been within reach but invisible. The victim's family retreated from public view, seeking privacy after decades of enforced exposure. Friends and neighbors offered support, unsure of what to say. Congratulations felt inappropriate. Condolences felt outdated. They navigated a strange emotional landscape where justice and grief coexisted without blending. The past had finally been acknowledged, but it had not loosened its grip. The defendant was transferred to a facility far from the town, his presence reduced to a line in official records. Some residents felt safer knowing he was gone. Others felt hollow, unsettled by the realization that his absence did not erase the years he had been among them. The idea that a violent act could coexist with normal life for so long challenged comforting assumptions about monsters and warning signs. As months passed, the media moved on, but the story lingered in quieter spaces. Late-night conversations. Empty roads. The service road became a symbol again, not just of a crime, but of the limits of resolution. People drove past it and wondered what justice looked like when it arrived 4 decades late. Was it enough? Was it fair? Did it matter? Academic discussions followed, panels dissecting the case as an example of modern forensics meeting historical failure. Experts debated reliability, ethics, the balance between progress and prudence. The case entered textbooks and conferences, transformed into a lesson stripped of its human edges. For those who had lived it, that transformation felt both validating and alienating. The town itself continued to change as towns do. New families moved in, unaware of the story etched into the pavement. Older residents carried it quietly, unsure when or how to pass it on. The murder became a reference point rather than an open wound, but it never fully faded. It resurfaced in unexpected ways, in jokes cut short, in sudden silences when certain years were mentioned. For other families with unsolved cases, the outcome ignited cautious hope. Calls to police departments increased. Letters arrived. Evidence was requested. Each inquiry carried the same question beneath the surface. Could this happen for us? Could time finally give something back? Law enforcement responded carefully, aware of the responsibility that hope carried. And yet, not all reactions were hopeful. Some questioned whether the case should have remained frozen, whether reopening it had created more harm than healing. They pointed to the uncertainties, the divided verdict, the lingering doubts. They asked whether justice delayed could ever truly be justice, or whether it was simply a narrative imposed on loss. The service road remained unchanged, a quiet witness to debates it could not answer. Sun and rain wore it down. Repairs came and went. There was no marker, no plaque, nothing to indicate what had happened there. Those who knew knew. Those who didn't passed through without pause. The land held its memory without explanation. In private moments, the detectives and family members found themselves asking questions they rarely voiced. What if the case had been solved sooner? What if technology had arrived earlier? What if someone had spoken up? These questions had no destination. They circled endlessly, feeding regret without offering resolution. As the first anniversary of the sentencing approached, the town marked it quietly. There were no ceremonies, no official statements, just an awareness that a year had passed since the past had been dragged back into the present. Life had continued as it always does, but not unchanged. The case had become something else now, no longer just an unsolved murder or a reopened file. It was a reminder, heavy and persistent, that time is not a cure. It is a container. It holds pain, memory, and truth until something forces it open. And as the Texas sky darkened each evening, stretching over roads that remembered more than they revealed, the question lingered, unresolved and insistent. Not whether the case had been solved, but whether the solving had been enough to quiet the echo that began on that summer night in 1982. Even after the verdict, the air in the town remained charged, taut like a wire strung too tightly. People moved cautiously, scanning faces, scanning streets, scanning the service road that had become a silent character in a story everyone knew but no one fully understood. The highway was the same highway, asphalt stretching under the Texas sun, weeds lining the edges, the wind carrying the faint scent of oil and dust, but everything else had shifted. The past had seeped into the present, and no one could pretend otherwise. The victim's family continued to navigate the strange aftermath. They were living in a liminal space, suspended between grief and a delayed sense of justice. Mornings began with coffee and quiet reflection. Evenings ended with the same questions, those they had learned to ask in whispers, or to never voice at all. Was the man in custody the one responsible? Did the conviction finally honor her life? Could 40 years of absence ever be reconciled with the sudden intrusion of truth? Every answer felt partial, incomplete, fleeting. Detectives who had worked the cold case reflected on decades of effort, some of it futile, some of it painstaking, all of it forming the bedrock for the eventual breakthrough. They had watched evidence sit in boxes for years, unexamined, forgotten. They had tracked the faintest leads, followed hunches, revisited witness statements, knowing instinctively that patience might be the only ally. Now, in the quiet that followed the trial, they wondered how much had been lost, how many moments could never be recovered. The town itself had changed, yet some elements remained stubbornly familiar. The same corner stores, the same small houses, the same neighbors nodding politely, smiling but carrying the burden of shared memory. Conversations touched lightly on the past, careful to avoid raw edges. Even when the case was discussed, it was discussed as a historical event, a story from another era with consequences that were still unfolding, but slightly removed from daily life. Local media revisited the story periodically, anniversaries of the arrest and trial providing hooks for retrospectives. They broadcast images of the service road still empty, still indifferent. They aired old photographs of the victim, her youth and innocence juxtaposed against the man in custody. Experts were invited to comment, discussing forensic advances, investigative techniques, and the ethics of revisiting decades-old cases. The public consumed it voraciously, hungry for a narrative that was messy and long, unlike the tidy stories of instant resolution often seen elsewhere. Despite media attention, some residents felt the story belonged to them alone. They had walked the streets of the town when fear was a constant companion. They had driven past the service road at night, hearts tight, windows rolled up, imagining dangers that might never have existed. Their memories were colored by years of absence, of unspoken anxiety, and now the resurfacing of the case stirred emotions that felt almost too heavy to bear. Some avoided conversation entirely. Others spoke freely, seeking to exorcise decades of suppressed fear. The balance between caution and expression was fragile. The suspect's presence in the legal system continued to ripple outward. Appeals were filed. Motions requested. The defense argued procedural points, highlighting the decades that had elapsed, the changes in standards, and the reliability of evidence collected long ago. Prosecutors pushed back with equal diligence, emphasizing that justice delayed was not justice denied, that the truth had waited patiently for its day, and that accountability remained the ultimate goal. Each filing, each counter, each ruling extended the story further, dragging the community along with it. Meanwhile, the human cost remained starkly visible. The victim's family carried scars that could not be erased, scars beyond the reach of verdicts or sentences. Their daily routines, relationships, and mental landscapes were all reshaped by events that had started 40 years earlier. Simple tasks became opportunities for reflection, for remembrance, for imagining what might have been. The anniversary of her disappearance was observed quietly, with small gestures that acknowledged absence more than presence. Candles flickered in windows, flowers were left on familiar spots, and moments of silence stretched long into the evening. Psychological burdens weighed heavily on those involved in the investigation. Detectives reflected not just on what had happened, but on what they might have missed, what doors they could have opened sooner, what lives could have been different. Guilt, though unspoken publicly, lingered among them, a subtle acknowledgement that law enforcement, like the town itself, had been both a participant in and a witness to prolonged uncertainty. The question of what if was a persistent companion, appearing in the quiet hours when memories replayed in slow motion. The service road remained a mute observer of these years. No plaque commemorated the night. No signs marked its infamy. Yet for those who knew, the asphalt, the weeds, and the bends in the road were etched into collective consciousness. It had become a symbol of the thin line between ordinary life and sudden tragedy, a place where routine could be shattered in an instant, and where memory carried the weight of unresolved questions. Each passing car was a reminder of the everyday world moving past a space still heavy with past violence. Over time, discussions in the town expanded to the broader implications of cold cases. Law enforcement, schools, local historians, and community leaders debated the nature of memory, accountability, and justice. Panels were formed. Public meetings were held. The conversations were not always comfortable, but they were necessary. They revealed the fragility of trust, the complexity of human behavior, and the persistence of questions that even decades cannot fully answer. Legal scholars reference the Texas case in studies of criminal justice and forensic science, analyzing the interplay between technology, human memory, and the law. It became a cautionary tale, a demonstration of the balance between patience and precision, and a warning that time both aids and obscures truth. Conferences discussed the ethics of delayed prosecutions, the reliability of witnesses, and the challenges of maintaining evidence integrity over decades. Each reference, each citation, served as a reminder that while the case may have reached a verdict, its impact continued to extend outward, shaping professional and public perspectives alike. Amidst the analysis, the human element remained unyielding. Those who had been close to the victim, those who had worked the case, and those who lived in the town all carried private narratives. Memories were recalled differently, emotions were experienced differently, and perspectives were shaped by years of waiting. Even those who had left the town maintained a connection, a quiet sense of responsibility or remorse, a recognition that the past never truly fades, even when removed geographically. The service road under Texas skies remained both ordinary and extraordinary. Sunlight fell across its surface, and wind carried the same scent of oil and dust, unchanged by time, indifferent to verdicts and trials. For residents, the road was a reminder that life moves forward, yet remains tethered to events that define it. It was a boundary between memory and oblivion, a place that had absorbed trauma silently and continued to bear witness without acknowledgement. In private reflections, investigators and family members often return to one thought: that time, while a healer in some ways, is a relentless observer in others. It watches, waits, and finally exposes what it has witnessed. 40 years had passed, yet the case had emerged again, demanding attention, accountability, and reflection. It forced the community to confront uncomfortable truths and to acknowledge that justice, though delayed, leaves a residue far beyond the courtroom walls. And as the town continued to live under Texas skies, the echoes of 1982 remained. Conversations paused, glances lingered, and every new day carried with it the weight of an unsolved night, now partially resolved but still heavy with unanswered questions. The cold case, once silent for decades, had spoken. Its voice was uneven, delayed, and incomplete, but it was undeniable. It reminded everyone that history is never truly past, that memory persists, and that the line between ordinary life and tragedy can be crossed in the blink of an eye, leaving echoes that resonate far into the future. The courtroom lights dimmed as the final witnesses were dismissed, leaving a silence that felt heavier than the noise of testimony. The trial, which had stretched for weeks, had become a strange mix of resolution and suspense. Everyone had expected clarity, closure, perhaps relief, but what remained was tension, thick and unyielding, clinging to the walls, the seats, and the people who had lived through it all. Time had changed the participants, but it could not alter the raw weight of what had happened on that summer night in 1982. Outside, the town adjusted to a new rhythm, one shaped by both history and the present. Shops opened and closed as usual, children played in yards, neighbors exchanged greetings, but beneath the surface awareness lingered. Every passing car, every late-night footstep, every unfamiliar face carried potential significance. The service road that had been silent for decades had become a psychological landmark. Residents drove past it, some faster, some slower, some refusing to drive there at all. The memory of that night overlaying the asphalt and weeds like a shadow that never fully lifted. The victim's family moved through these days like ghosts, balancing between exhaustion and vigilance. Each morning brought reminders of what had been lost. Each evening carried reflections of the trial and its aftermath. Conversations with friends and relatives were cautious, measured. Questions remained. Had justice truly been served? Could 40 years of absence ever be reconciled with a verdict handed down in the present? Even as sentences were carried out and appeals processed, the emotional resonance of that night lingered, impossible to quantify or contain. Detectives who had reopened the case spent hours reflecting on every step they had taken. They reviewed evidence, notes, and photographs, thinking about opportunities missed, leads ignored, and assumptions made. Every moment from the past was scrutinized through the lens of hindsight. Each decision weighed against the benefit of decades of technological advancement. The crime, the investigation, and the resolution had become a living document of their careers, proof of persistence and frustration entwined. The defense continued to work diligently, filing appeals and motions that would prolong legal proceedings. They emphasized the difficulty of relying on witnesses whose memories had dimmed over decades, the potential degradation of physical evidence, and the challenges of drawing conclusions from data collected in an era before modern forensics. Every document, every filing, was a reminder that even as the past yielded new information, certainty remained elusive. Meanwhile, the town's collective psyche absorbed these developments unevenly. Conversations at the grocery store or the local diner drifted toward cautious speculation. Older residents recalled details with precision, recalling the sounds of engines, the flicker of headlights, and the feeling of unease that had settled over them that night. Younger residents pieced together the story from second-hand accounts, images, and newspaper articles, filling gaps with imagination and apprehension. The past had infiltrated the present, shaping behavior, perception, and expectation. Local media continued to cover developments in measured cycles, reporting on sentencing, appeals, and procedural updates. They revisited the service road with cameras and microphones, capturing the stillness, the weeds, the heat rising off asphalt, offering viewers a visual anchor to a story stretched across decades. Headlines were recycled with new emphasis, reminding readers that while time had moved forward, the consequences of a single night remained unresolved in the hearts and minds of those affected. For the victim's family, anniversaries became moments of reflection rather than commemoration. They lit candles quietly, leaving flowers in familiar places, observing the rituals of remembrance without spectacle. Each gesture served as a private acknowledgement that the past could not be erased, and that the echoes of loss would always be present, shaped by memory, grief, and the knowledge that justice, though pursued, could never restore what was lost. Law enforcement agencies across the region watched the case closely, recognizing both its successes and its lingering challenges. The use of modern forensic technology in conjunction with historical evidence became a case study, demonstrating both the potential and limits of criminal investigations extended across decades. Procedural reviews and internal evaluations were conducted, and officers were trained to consider the persistence of cold cases not as anomalies, but as ongoing responsibilities requiring diligence, patience, and integrity. The town itself continued to evolve, new families moving in, old families aging in place, landscapes shifting with development and decay. The service road remained unchanged in form, but it had transformed in meaning, a landmark of memory and fear, caution and reflection. Its asphalt bore silent witness, absorbing decades of human observation, while weeds and dust settled over evidence long gone but not forgotten. Psychologically, the case reshaped understanding of justice, timing, and consequence. It demonstrated the impact of delayed resolution, not only on the victim and her family, but on the broader community. Residents became more aware of the fragile boundary between normal life and violence, of the subtle signs that might indicate danger, and of the enduring significance of memory, both individual and collective. Within law enforcement, detectives reflected on the moral dimensions of the case. The choice to reopen a decades-old investigation had profound consequences, bringing relief to some, suspicion to others, and controversy to all. It highlighted the tension between scientific capability and human limitation, between the passage of time and the persistence of accountability. Each officer involved carried private knowledge of both failure and success, of the unresolved grief that accompanies homicide investigations, and of the ethical responsibility to pursue truth, even when decades have passed. In the quiet of the town, late at night, the service road remained a silent witness, its edges blurred by weeds, its surface scarred by traffic. It had seen nothing and yet knew everything. Residents who passed it felt a subtle unease, a tension carried forward from memories, warnings, and stories passed down. Even for those not alive in 1982, it represented a threshold, a liminal space where ordinary life and extraordinary tragedy intersected. The unresolved questions continued to hover. How had someone lived alongside a community for decades without detection? What could be learned from the past to prevent similar tragedies in the future? Was the justice now administered enough to quiet the lingering echoes of fear and grief? These questions were not easily answered, and the town adapted to their persistent presence, integrating them into daily awareness without fully resolving them. In the end, the cold case demonstrated the persistence of truth, even when delayed, but also the fragility of perception, memory, and emotional closure. It reminded all who encountered it that time could be both an ally and an obstacle, that justice could be pursued but never fully guarantee peace, and that some events leave traces that endure far beyond their immediate moment, shaping communities, lives, and legacies in ways that are both visible and invisible. And so, as Texas nights stretched across highways and backroads, the echoes of 1982 whispered in the wind, unseen but felt. The service road remained, indifferent yet unforgettable. The people remembered, reflected, and carried the weight of decades, a reminder that even when cases are solved, the past does not simply disappear. It lingers, persistent, haunting, and unresolved, leaving everyone who encounters it changed in ways both subtle and profound. Even after the legal proceedings had concluded, the town felt unsettled, as if the years of silence had left an invisible residue, one that no verdict could fully cleanse. Streets once familiar seemed altered under the weight of memory. The service road, the very axis of the tragedy, carried a presence all its own, quiet, enduring, indifferent to time and verdicts alike. Residents avoided it, drove past it cautiously, or lingered too long, imagining the moment that had changed everything. It had become a line between what was seen and unseen, known and unknown, ordinary and horrific. The victim's family, now navigating life after the trial, grappled with complex emotions. Relief mingled with continued grief, and even satisfaction at the conviction could not erase 40 years of uncertainty. Simple routines, the hum of morning coffee, the quiet of evening meals, were layered with remembrance. Memories of laughter, voice, and presence returned unbidden, sharp and raw. Their days were measured not just by time but by the echo of loss, by the sense of absence that no court could fully reconcile. Investigators who had reopened the case reflected on their own experiences with something akin to awe and disquiet. They had chased shadows, relied on intuition, technology, and painstaking review of decades-old records. Each breakthrough had felt miraculous, yet each success was tempered by the recognition of what had been lost along the way. Years of evidence degradation, witnesses who had passed away, memories reshaped by time. Their persistence had yielded answers, but the cost remained visible in the faces of the family, in the town's collective memory, and in their own sleepless nights. The suspect, now serving his sentence, became a quiet figure in the broader narrative. His presence was removed physically but remained symbolically. Friends, neighbors, and community members continued to wrestle with the dissonance of a man who had lived ordinary life for decades, yet now carried the extraordinary weight of a decades-old crime. His case prompted discussions about the nature of accountability, the complexity of human behavior, and the ability of society to detect evil hidden within the mundane. The town, once settled in uneasy normalcy, had been thrust back into a state of heightened awareness. Conversations at local stores, gas stations, and diners frequently returned to the case. Some residents expressed relief that justice had finally been pursued. Others expressed doubt or resentment, questioning the reliability of decades-old evidence or the ethics of reopening a case so long dormant. The dialogue was fragmented, fraught with emotion, and impossible to contain, illustrating how a single night could ripple across decades in a community's psyche. Law enforcement agencies continued to use the case as a reference point, evaluating procedures, archival methods, and investigative strategies. It became a blueprint for balancing patience with innovation, demonstrating both the potential of modern forensic technology and the enduring challenges posed by cold cases. Training programs incorporated its lessons, emphasizing meticulous record-keeping, the preservation of evidence, and the nuanced understanding of witness memory over long intervals. The case transcended the local, becoming a touchstone for professionals across the region. Psychologically, the impact extended far beyond the courtroom. Witnesses, neighbors, and even those peripherally involved found themselves revisiting memories and emotions previously buried. Conversations were tinged with careful observation and reflection. People measured what they said and how they reacted, aware that every word could carry weight in a narrative still unfolding in private and public spheres. The trial had reopened not just legal proceedings, but the emotional architecture of the town itself. The service road, unchanged in form yet transformed in meaning, continued to occupy a unique space in the collective imagination. Sunlight glinted off asphalt that had been witness to horror. Wind swept through surrounding weeds that obscured footprints and evidence alike. For residents, it was both a literal and figurative threshold, an ordinary roadway overlaid with extraordinary memory. Each journey along it, whether in haste or reflection, was a confrontation with both absence and presence, a confrontation with what had happened and what would never fully be known. The academic and professional communities dissected the case, analyzing it for its implications in forensic science, criminal justice, and psychology. Conferences discussed the ethics of delayed prosecution and the reliability of long-term evidence. Studies explored memory degradation, the influence of rumor on perception, and the persistence of trauma across decades. These examinations transformed the local tragedy into a broader narrative, demonstrating that the ramifications of a cold case extended far beyond the immediate circle of those involved. Despite the legal closure, the town was not at peace. Emotional closure remained elusive. Residents struggled with the fact that while a verdict had been reached, it could not undo the suffering, the fear, or the uncertainty that had defined decades of their lives. The balance between accountability and understanding remained tenuous. Life went on, but with layers of vigilance, introspection, and caution that had never existed before. Families of other victims watched the outcome closely, hoping for the same pursuit of truth in their cases, yet also wary of the potential for disappointment. They reached out to law enforcement, provided evidence, and urged the reopening of other cold cases, inspired by the proof that time, while formidable, could be challenged. The ripple effects of this single case began to spread, influencing procedures, advocacy, and public perception far beyond the boundaries of the town itself. In quiet moments, detectives revisited the evidence, the notes, the photographs, and the memories that had guided them. They contemplated the intersection of fate, timing, and human decision-making. Each insight was tempered by uncertainty. Each resolution highlighted what had been lost. They understood that while answers had been obtained, the narrative remained partial, a mosaic of fact, probability, and interpretation that could never be fully complete. Even as new generations moved into the town, unaware of the original events, the service road and the memory of the victim held sway. Oral histories, whispers, and subtle references ensured that the story was preserved, even as direct experience faded. In this way, the past and present coexisted, layered and interwoven, illustrating how a single act could resonate through time, shaping perception, behavior, and understanding across decades. The case's legacy, therefore, was both tangible and intangible. Tangible in its influence on law enforcement, forensic practice, and legal precedent. Intangible in the psychological, emotional, and social fabric of the community. It reminded all involved that the consequences of violence extend far beyond the immediate moment, that the pursuit of justice is never linear, and that time, while a great revealer, also tests patience, endurance, and the human capacity to reconcile with the unknown. And as the Texas night stretched over highways and fields, as wind whispered through weeds and asphalt, the echoes of 1982 remained. A cold case had been solved, but its lessons, its questions, and its shadows persisted. The service road was silent, the town moved forward, yet the memory endured. A quiet testament to the persistence of truth, the weight of absence, and the enduring human desire for closure, however elusive it might remain. Time had a strange way of bending in the town after the trial. Days blended into weeks, weeks into months, yet the shadow of 1982 hung over everything. The service road, once merely a stretch of asphalt connecting highways, had transformed into a silent monument to memory, grief, and the unsettling persistence of unanswered questions. People who had once driven past it without thought now slowed, peered through windshield reflections, or avoided it entirely, as if acknowledging it too casually might disturb its uneasy stillness. The road itself seemed to hold its breath, aware that its history would never be forgotten, and that its silence carried more weight than any verdict could confer. The victim's family moved through a landscape layered with emotional complexity. Relief at the conviction mingled with enduring sorrow, and even the sense of justice achieved could not erase 40 years of uncertainty. Daily routines became rituals of remembrance, subtle acts that spoke louder than words. A photograph placed with care, a candle lit quietly at dusk, the soft repetition of her name in whispered moments. Every gesture was a negotiation with grief, a way to keep the memory alive while attempting to navigate the aftermath of delayed resolution. Detectives continued to examine the case from multiple angles, aware that their work extended beyond the courtroom. Every detail had been scrutinized, yet each reflection revealed more to consider. They reviewed procedural choices, investigative decisions, and timelines with the clarity of hindsight, searching for lessons in both success and failure. The work reminded them that cold cases were not static. They evolved alongside advances in technology, changes in society, and the persistent murmur of human memory. The defendant's life had shifted irrevocably, contained now within the confines of a correctional facility. The town's perception of him oscillated between a man who had evaded justice for decades and a symbol of the fragility of ordinary life when intersected by violence. Friends and acquaintances struggled to reconcile the person they had known with the actions for which he had been convicted. The dissonance left a lasting impression, a reminder that evil can hide in plain sight, sometimes for decades, undetected even by those closest to it. Public discourse extended beyond the immediate community. Journalists, legal scholars, and law enforcement agencies examined the case as an exemplar of the potential and limitations of delayed justice. Panels and conferences dissected the intersection of forensic innovation and historical evidence, analyzing how technology could resurrect truth from the shadow of time. Ethical considerations, procedural challenges, and psychological ramifications were debated extensively, illustrating the broader significance of a case rooted in a small Texas town, yet resonating across professional and social landscapes. Local conversations remained tinged with the past, subtle yet persistent. Cafes, markets, and workplaces echoed with recollections and speculation. Older residents recounted their memories of that summer night, often with vivid detail, while younger residents tried to understand the significance of events they had only encountered in fragments. Photographs, news articles, or whispered anecdotes. The town's collective consciousness became a tapestry of partial recollections, assumptions, and reflection, each thread contributing to a shared awareness that the past remained active and potent. The service road itself stood as a quiet, almost sentient observer. Its worn asphalt, lined with weeds, bore witness to both history and memory. Sunlight cast long shadows across its surface, wind shifted dust and debris, and occasional vehicles traversed it, unaware of its significance. Yet for those who knew every detail, the curve, the roadside vegetation, the faint remnants of old tire marks, was a reminder of a night that had shaped generations, a place where time had both paused and accelerated, holding secrets that even verdicts could not fully illuminate. Investigative reflection extended to considerations of memory and evidence over time. Witnesses' recollections, once crucial, were now understood through the lens of psychological research on memory decay and reconstruction. Investigators recognized that perception, emotion, and rumor had all influenced statements made decades ago. Forensics provided a bridge between historical uncertainty and contemporary precision, yet even the most advanced technology could not fully replicate human observation or fill gaps left by absent or altered memories. The town's social fabric was subtly reshaped by the case. Relationships, friendships, and neighborhood dynamics bore the imprint of fear, revelation, and reflection. Conversations were cautious, interactions measured, and the history of the case lingered in unspoken ways. The community had been forced to confront both the extraordinary presence of a hidden crime and the ordinary lives of those implicated, a juxtaposition that left emotional traces extending beyond the immediate parties involved. Media coverage, though less intense than during the trial, continued to influence perception. Documentaries, newspaper retrospectives, and legal analyses revisited the case periodically, emphasizing forensic breakthroughs, procedural diligence, and the human consequences of long-delayed justice. For residents, the repetition of narratives served both as validation and as a reminder of the fragility of closure. The story had entered cultural memory, shaping discourse beyond the physical boundaries of the town, ensuring that its impact would extend far into the future. Within law enforcement, the case became a touchstone for evaluating cold case methodologies. Protocols were updated, training programs re-examined, and archival practices refined. Investigators and administrators recognized the value of persistence, the importance of interdisciplinary collaboration, and the ethical responsibility to pursue justice across decades. The Texas case illustrated the delicate balance between patience and initiative, between technological potential and human limitation, providing a template for managing similarly complex investigations elsewhere. The psychological aftermath persisted alongside procedural reflections. Witnesses, family members, and residents grappled with residual trauma, reinterpreted memories, and evolving perceptions of risk and safety. Even after the court's ruling, the community carried a heightened awareness of the thin line separating ordinary life from extraordinary violence. This awareness influenced behavior subtly yet persistently, altering routines, shaping vigilance, and embedding itself into collective memory. The service road under the unrelenting Texas sun remained unchanged in physical form yet transformed in meaning. For locals, it was more than asphalt. It was a temporal marker, a threshold of memory, grief, and reflection. Every journey along it was an encounter with the past, whether conscious or unconscious, and its silent persistence reinforced the idea that while legal processes could adjudicate acts, they could not erase the lived consequences of those acts across decades. Finally, the town's story reflected the enduring tension between closure and ambiguity. Justice had been pursued, verdicts rendered, and sentences imposed, yet uncertainty lingered. Questions about memory, evidence, human behavior, and ethical responsibility persisted. The case had revealed that the past does not remain static, that time can both obscure and reveal, and that the pursuit of truth is a continuous, imperfect process. Residents and investigators alike were left to navigate the space between resolution and reflection, between knowledge and mystery, understanding that the echoes of a single night in 1982 could resonate across generations, shaping lives, behaviors, and communities in ways that would never be fully quieted. And so, as the Texas night stretched across highways and fields, as the wind swept through weeds lining the service road, and as the stars emerged one by one in a sky unchanged by human drama, the memory of 1982 lingered. The town moved forward, children grew, families aged, yet the past remained indelible and persistent, a testament to the power of memory, the pursuit of justice, and the inescapable imprint of a night that had begun as tragedy and continued as a living presence in the hearts, minds, and streets of all who remembered. Years had passed since the trial, yet the town never truly returned to normal. Time had moved forward as it always does, but it carried with it the weight of the past, an invisible gravity anchored to one stretch of Texas asphalt. The service road remained unchanged in appearance, cracked in places, lined with scrubby weeds, carrying dust in the summer heat, but it was no longer just a road. It had become a marker of memory, a place where ordinary life and unspeakable tragedy intersected. Residents drove past with caution, some avoiding it entirely, some staring longer than necessary, compelled to confront the night that had changed everything. The road itself seemed to breathe with the stories it held, patient, silent, unyielding. The victim's family continued to live under the shadow of memory. Each day brought reminders of what had been lost, of what could never be recovered. Even after decades of waiting and a trial that ended in conviction, grief remained unyielding. Mornings began quietly, with rituals of remembrance, photographs, candles, and whispered names. Nights ended in reflection, haunted by the gaps between memory and reality, by the knowledge that 40 years of absence could never truly be made whole. The conviction, though a measure of justice, was never enough to quiet the ache, to fill the empty spaces left by the life taken too soon. For law enforcement, the case had become a cornerstone of procedural reflection. Detectives and administrators studied each decision, each line of inquiry, each missed opportunity, and each successful breakthrough. They understood that cold cases required more than skill. They demanded persistence, patience, and the willingness to challenge the limits of both human memory and technological capability. The lessons learned in the Texas investigation were shared widely, influencing training, protocols, and approaches to long unsolved crimes. The case became a testament to the delicate balance between human intuition and forensic science, between the patience of decades and the urgency of justice. The defendant, now years into his sentence, remained a silent presence in the narrative. His life was confined, monitored, and reduced to routine, yet his shadow stretched far beyond prison walls. Friends, neighbors, and acquaintances struggled with the dissonance of the man they had known. A neighbor, co-worker, ordinary figure, and the man convicted of murder decades later. The cognitive dissonance unsettled the community, illustrating the uncomfortable truth that evil can coexist with the ordinary, that danger can remain hidden in plain sight, and that appearances are often unreliable. The town itself was altered in subtle, persistent ways. Residents navigated their daily routines with a quiet awareness, a recognition that violence had once passed among them unnoticed, that ordinary roads could conceal extraordinary acts. Conversations were careful, relationships sometimes tentative, and trust reevaluated against the backdrop of memory. Even those who had arrived after 1982 absorbed the weight of the story, inheriting the collective consciousness of a town shaped by tragedy and delayed justice. Media attention persisted intermittently. Documentaries revisited the case, news outlets analyzed procedural lessons, and legal scholars discussed the ethical complexities of delayed prosecution. Images of the service road, photographs of the victim, and faded portraits of the defendant were circulated again and again, embedding the story further into cultural memory. While coverage waned from the intensity of the trial, it never disappeared entirely, serving as a reminder that some events refused to fade. Psychologically, the case reshaped understanding of trauma, memory, and resilience. Witnesses and residents reflected on the fragility of human recollection, on the distortions that decades can bring, and on the persistence of unresolved grief. Memories were revisited, reinterpreted, and often relived, illustrating that justice and closure exist on different planes. While the legal system could provide answers, it could not fully reconcile the emotional and social consequences of violence. The service road under the expansive Texas sky remained an unchanging witness. Sunlight and shadow played across its surface, wind stirred dust and debris, and vehicles passed over it daily, unaware of the history beneath their tires. To those who knew, however, it was a threshold, a liminal space where ordinary life met the extraordinary. It represented absence, presence, memory, and the persistent question of how justice can intersect with time. Each journey along it, deliberate or incidental, was a confrontation with both past and present. Academic and professional communities continued to study the case, drawing lessons in forensics, criminal justice, and human behavior. Panels discussed how delayed prosecutions interact with witness reliability, evidence preservation, and the moral dimensions of justice. Psychological studies examined the impact of unresolved trauma over decades, while legal analyses focused on procedural challenges and ethical considerations. The Texas case, though local in origin, became a template for understanding the broader implications of cold cases, influencing practices far beyond the borders of the town where it all began. For families of other victims, the case sparked cautious hope. They submitted evidence, encouraged authorities to revisit long-dormant files, and watched closely for precedent. The notion that time could be challenged, that truth could be pursued even decades later, inspired action and reinforced the necessity of diligence. Yet the case also reminded them that answers, while sought, might remain partial, incomplete, and emotionally complicated. The town, in quiet moments, reflected on the limits of resolution. Justice had been administered, Yet the emotional, social, and psychological echoes of 1982 persisted. The community had been forced to confront the hidden complexities of human behavior, the persistence of memory, and the fragility of safety. Life moved forward, children grew, new residents arrived. Yet the events of that summer night remained etched into the fabric of the town, influencing perception, action, and understanding. The road, the asphalt, the weeds, the silence, they bore witness as they had for decades. Sun and wind, dust and shadow, all carried the memory forward. Legal resolutions, while critical, could not erase the lived consequences, the grief, or the collective awareness that something extraordinary had occurred, forever shaping the town's identity. In the end, the Texas cold case illustrated the persistence of truth and the persistence of memory. It showed that justice, while attainable, is rarely absolute, and that the human experience of loss, fear, and uncertainty transcends verdicts and sentences. Even after decades, even after legal closure, the past continues to exert influence, shaping communities, families, and individuals in ways both visible and invisible. As night fell over Texas, stars emerging above highways and backroads, the echoes of 1982 whispered across the land. The service road remained silent, yet it spoke in ways that no words could fully capture. The town moved forward, children played, families lived, yet all carried with them the imprint of a single night, a single act, and the unrelenting truth that time, while it may pass, never truly erases what has been witnessed. Memory persists, justice persists, and some questions, no matter how long the years, never fully disappear.